People like you should be grateful for coach. First class is not for your kind. The words struck like a slap across the cabin, delivered by a flight attendant who never even looked at the name on the boarding pass she had just crumpled in her hand. Her voice was sharp, deliberate, loud enough for every passenger in rows 1 through 4 to hear. The insult was not a mistake. It was a judgment. And it landed on Marcus Carter like it had landed 1,000 times before, not because he believed it, but because he recognized it. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we are glad you are here. Now, back to Marcus Carter. Seat 2 amperes gleamed under soft cabin lights, wide leather cushions, polished armrests, and the faint scent of citrus cleaner. But in that moment, it felt less like luxury and more like a courtroom. Marcus sat calmly, dressed in dark jeans, plain sneakers, and a simple black t-shirt. No tailored suit, no Rolex flashing under the light. Nothing to signal billionaire, nothing to signal owner. That was intentional. He had boarded this flight without an entourage, without cameras, without even his assistant by his side. He wanted to see something for himself. And now, he was seeing it in real time. The flight attendant narrowed her eyes, lips curled. "Sir, hand me your ticket again. Passengers like you have tried this before." Her colleague joined in, younger, smug, leaning against the galley wall like he was watching a show. "Yeah, buddy, looks like economy is more your lane. Let's not make this harder than it needs to be." Marcus slid both his ID and boarding pass forward, steady, unhurried. The Illinois license gleamed under the overhead lights. The boarding pass still showed first class, seat 2 amperes, confirmed and paid. But the documents might as well have been blank paper in their eyes. The attendant scoffed. "Fake. I have seen this trick in Dallas. Not this time." Behind Marcus, a couple shifted in the aisle, Richard and Laura Bennett. Platinum medallion tags dangled from their luggage. Their eyes gleamed with quiet entitlement as they stepped forward, champagne flutes still in hand. "Is this going to be a problem?" Laura asked sweetly. The attendant answered without hesitation. "Not for you. We are handling it." She motioned to seat 2 amperes, Marcus's seat, as if it already belonged to them. The cabin tightened. Passengers leaned forward, murmurs spreading like sparks across dry grass. A woman in row 4 pulled out her phone, thumb hovering over the record button. "This does not look right," she whispered to her seatmate. A man beside her nodded, eyes locked on Marcus. The captain arrived then, tall, stern, his uniform pressed within an inch of perfection. He looked at Marcus the way men in power often look at people they have already judged. "Vacate the seat, sir. Immediately. We have real VIPs waiting." His voice was flat, authoritative, rehearsed. He was not asking. He was removing. Marcus sat still. He had been here before, in different rooms, in different decades. At 25, he had been told he did not fit the image of a regional airline manager. At 32, a hotel clerk in Los Angeles told him, "You cannot be the one on this reservation." At 40, a banker refused to run his name, certain a black man in jeans could not be moving millions. And now, here again, the same tone, the same certainty, only the uniforms had changed. The torn boarding pass hit the carpet. The couple slipped past him, settling into his seat as if it had always been theirs. The attendant smiled at them like hosts greeting royalty. Around them, first class buzzed with whispers, disbelief, and quiet anger. But Marcus did not raise his voice. He did not call for help. He did not move at all. He sat anchored to that moment, silent, calm, patient, because the insult was not new. The mistake was not surprising. And in less than 1 hour, the price of that mistake would climb to $900 million. The deal that kept this airline afloat would not survive this flight. And the people who thought he did not belong in first class would soon discover that he owned much more than the seat they tried to take. The flight attendant's hand still hovered near Marcus's shoulder, as if her touch could erase him from the cabin. But Marcus remained perfectly still, his gaze fixed not on her, not even on the Bennetts now lounging in his seat, but on the polished aisle stretching forward like a runway of judgment. Every eye in first class was waiting to see if he would shrink or if he would stand. He chose neither. He simply stayed, seated, calm, silent, present. That silence unsettled them more than any protest could have. The younger attendant smirked, lowering his voice just enough to sound like gossip but loud enough for half the cabin to hear. Happens all the time. Someone prints a fake boarding pass, thinks they are slick, then gets caught. Policy is policy. His words dripped with smug certainty, but the passengers in rows 3 and 4 were no longer nodding along. A woman in a red blazer shook her head. "I saw his ticket scan green," she whispered. Her husband pulled out his phone and tapped the record button, the red dot glowing against the dim cabin light. From the galley, a trainee flight attendant lingered. She was young, no more than 22, her uniform slightly wrinkled at the collar. She shifted her weight nervously, her eyes darting between Marcus and her senior colleagues. Her voice was soft, almost swallowed by the hum of the engines. "Captain, I think his ticket is valid. I watched it scan." "Ho." The lead attendant spun around sharply. "Stay out of this, Mia. You are not trained for escalation." The dismissal was sharp, a verbal slap. Mia flinched but did not retreat. Instead, she reached into her jacket pocket, thumb brushing against the record button on her phone. The truth needed witnesses, and she was not going to let it vanish into silence. Marcus finally moved, not to rise, not to argue, but to pick up his boarding pass from the floor. The paper was creased, torn down the center, but the ink still declared what the staff refused to see. Marcus Carter, seat 2 amperes, first class. He placed it gently back on the tray table and folded his hands. His voice, when it came, was low and even. "Run it again." The captain's jaw tightened. He did not. Instead, he gestured to the couple now sipping wine in Marcus's rightful seat. "Sir, you are delaying takeoff. If you do not comply, security will remove you. Horizon Airlines will not tolerate fraud." Fraud. The word cut deeper than the torn boarding pass. It echoed through the cabin like a verdict handed down without trial. A teenager 2 rows back whispered to his mother, "But he showed them everything." The mother nodded, pulling her phone higher, angling it toward the scene. Marcus did not react. His calm was unshakable, forged by decades of hearing that same word in different rooms. Fraud when he signed his first real estate contract at 23. Fraud when he walked into a boardroom at 30 with numbers no one believed he could produce. Fraud when he bought his first controlling stake in a company at 36. And now, fraud again for daring to sit in the seat he had paid for. The cabin was no longer silent. Whispers rippled. Phones rose higher. Doubt spread through the rows. The lie was becoming visible, and the truth was beginning to find its voice. The tension in the cabin thickened like storm clouds before lightning. Every second Marcus remained silent, seemed to pull the air tighter, drawing every pair of eyes to the injustice unfolding. The Bennetts in seat 2 amperes leaned back comfortably, sipping champagne, but their glances toward Marcus betrayed unease. They were sitting in a seat that was not theirs, and they knew it. The lead attendant crossed her arms, standing tall as though authority alone could bury the truth. "Sir, last warning," she declared, her voice sharp, carrying across the rows. "Leave first class, or security will remove you. We have standards to uphold." Standards. That word landed like another insult. Passengers exchanged looks, some scoffing, others murmuring. Standards were not about safety, not about policy. Standards, in that moment, were about appearance, about who looked like they belonged and who did not. Marcus slowly lifted his head. His voice was calm, deliberate, and clear enough for the entire cabin to hear. "You keep saying policy, you keep saying standards, but the only thing you have enforced tonight is bias." Gasps broke from the middle rows. A woman in row 4 muttered, "He is right." Her companion nodded, his phone already capturing the words. The younger attendant stepped forward, emboldened by the captain's presence. "You can say what you want, but you are not staying in this seat. We do not let scammers sit in first class." His lips curled into a smirk. "Not dressed like that." The phrase sliced through the room. Not dressed like that. It was not about a ticket. It was not about security. It was about image, about the quiet code too many people had lived under for too long. The trainee, Mia, finally stepped closer, her voice trembling but firm. "Captain, I watched the scanner. His ticket turned green. Twice. He belongs here." The captain did not even look at her. "You are out of line, trainee. Step back before you lose your position." Mia's face flushed, but she did not move. Her phone was already recording, hidden in her palm. Her courage was fragile, but it was real. And it was enough to make a few passengers lean forward, whispering, "She saw it. She knows." Marcus remained steady, unmoved. He looked at the crew, then at the passengers watching, and spoke again. "You can tear paper, you can deny my seat, you can even call security, but you cannot erase the truth. The truth is, I paid for 2 amperes. The truth is, you are removing me not because of fraud, not because of safety, but because of how I look." A heavy silence followed. Then, from row 3, a man in a gray blazer stood. "He is right. I saw his ticket too. This is discrimination." Phones rose higher now, red recording lights glowing like signals in the dim cabin. The lie was cracking, the weight of witnesses was beginning to shift, and the crew, once certain of their control, now looked less like authority and more like defendants in a trial they could not win. The captain's eyes narrowed, his voice dropping to a low growl that carried just as far as a shout. "Enough of this performance. If you do not leave seat 2 amperes immediately, you will be escorted off this flight and banned from future travel." His tone was final, the kind of voice meant to end conversations and silence resistance. But Marcus did not move. He folded his hands over the torn boarding pass on the tray table, his expression calm, almost unreadable. Then, with a slow breath, he said 5 words that seemed to hang in the cabin like a bell tolling in the distance. "Run my name, Marcus Carter." The lead attendant scoffed, shaking her head. "You think dropping a name changes anything? Fraud is still fraud." She glanced at the Bennetts, reassuring them with a smile that looked more forced now. But the husband shifted uneasily in his seat, as if the confidence he had walked in with was slipping. From row 4, a woman's voice rose above the murmurs. "He told you his name. Why not just check?" Several passengers nodded in agreement, their phones still recording. A teenager muttered to his friend, "They do not want to check because they are afraid of what they will find." Marcus remained silent, letting the weight of that possibility settle over the room. He had learned long ago that silence, when held with confidence, could be louder than shouting. The younger attendant leaned closer, his smirk faltering for the first time. "If you really are who you say, then prove it right now." He expected Marcus to scramble, to pull out another form of identification, to defend himself with noise. But Marcus only sat taller, his voice steady as steel. "I do not owe you proof. I paid for this seat. Your system verified it. Twice. The burden is not on me." Ugh. Gasps spread. Passengers exchanged wide-eyed glances. Someone whispered, "That is true. Why should he have to prove more than anyone else?" Mia, the trainee, stepped forward again, her courage sharper now. Her phone was still recording, but her words were what mattered most. "Captain, with all respect, this is wrong. I saw the scan, I saw his name. He belongs in 2 amperes. You are removing him because of bias, not because of protocol." The captain's face reddened, veins rising in his neck. "You are out of order. One more word and you are finished." But Mia did not back down. She lifted her chin and repeated, louder this time, "He belongs in 2 amperes." The cabin erupted in murmurs. A man in row 3 clapped once, sharp and decisive. Then another passenger joined, then another, until a ripple of agreement filled the air. The tide was shifting. Marcus looked around the cabin, his gaze sweeping over the witnesses who had begun to speak up, over the crew who were losing control, over the couple still sipping champagne in his stolen seat. His words, when they came, were quiet but cut like a blade. "Every insult, every lie, every attempt to erase me, all of it has been recorded, and soon every person who signed off on this behavior will answer for it." The room stilled. The arrogance in the crew's eyes began to fade. For the first time, fear flickered where certainty once stood, and Marcus had not raised his voice once. A hush fell over the cabin, the kind that makes every sound louder, every breath sharper. The champagne glasses in the Bennett's hands no longer looked like symbols of privilege. They trembled slightly as the couple exchanged uneasy glances. Phones hovered higher, capturing every word, every shift in body language. What had begun as a routine power play by the crew was unraveling in front of dozens of witnesses. From the aisle, a man in his 30s wearing a gray business jacket stood, his voice steady and clear. "I am recording this, and I want to be very clear for anyone watching later. This man showed his ticket. It was valid. I saw the green light on the scanner with my own eyes." He turned his phone slightly toward Marcus, as if to underline the point. "They are lying to all of us." "Oh." The younger attendant's face flushed red. "Sit down, sir. You are interfering with airline protocol." But the passenger did not sit. His chin lifted. Protocol does not mean prejudice. We all see what is happening here. This is not about safety. This is not about fraud. This is about appearance. Murmurs erupted across the rows, voices rising in waves. He is right. This is discrimination. I cannot believe we are watching this. The hum of dissent filled the cabin, drowning out the authority the crew had once held. Mia, the trainee, took a small but decisive step closer to Marcus. Her voice shook at first, but her words carried strength. I watched the scanner twice. Both times it turned green. The system recognized his ticket. His seat is 2 amperes. She paused, her eyes flicking to the captain. And you are ignoring it because you have already decided who belongs here and who does not. M6. The captain's jaw tightened, his authority crumbling under the weight of witnesses. He raised his hand as if to summon security, but hesitation froze him. He could feel the cameras trained on him, the judgment already spreading beyond the walls of the cabin. Marcus finally broke his silence. He leaned forward slightly, his voice calm, deliberate, measured. You can continue this performance, but understand something. Every word, every action, every refusal to honor the truth is being documented. And when this is over, it will not be me answering questions. It will be you. The younger attendant scoffed, but his voice cracked. You are bluffing. People like you do not have that kind of power. Marcus met his eyes with the stillness of someone who had endured decades of this same arrogance. Power does not shout. Power does not threaten. Power waits. And then it decides. Gasps rippled through the rows. A teenager whispered to his mother, "He does not sound like a man bluffing." The mother squeezed her son's hand and nodded slowly, eyes locked on Marcus. The atmosphere had shifted. The crew no longer looked untouchable. They looked cornered. And for the first time, the balance of power in the cabin tilted away from the uniforms and toward the man they had tried to erase. The silence broke when Laura Bennett, still seated in 2 amperes with her husband, finally spoke. Her voice was soft, almost apologetic. Maybe we should give the seat back. This does not feel right. Richard Bennett snapped his head toward her, his tone sharp. Do not say another word. They know what they are doing. We are the priority passengers. But even as he spoke, his eyes darted nervously around the cabin. The applause that had started for Marcus a moment ago was still echoing in whispers, a current he could not stop. The lead attendant tried to regain control. She raised her voice, higher than before, attempting to sound authoritative but landing closer to desperate. Attention passengers. This man has provided fraudulent documentation. Please remain seated while security resolves the situation. Her words hung in the air, but no one believed them. A woman in row 3 shook her head and muttered loudly enough for several phones to capture. We all saw the ticket. Stop lying. Another passenger, an older man with silver hair, stood slowly and said, If this is how you treat someone who paid for first class, then none of us are safe. He left his phone recording in plain sight, daring the crew to challenge him. Marcus sat still, his hands folded, his calm presence anchoring the room. His silence was no longer emptiness. It was resistance. It was defiance. It was louder than their accusations. The younger attendant leaned in, his confidence breaking under the weight of witnesses. You think you can sit there quietly and intimidate us? You are nobody. Nobody. His voice cracked on the last word, betraying his fear. Marcus's reply was low, steady, unhurried. If I were nobody, you would not be so afraid of me. The words sliced through the tension like a blade. Gasps filled the cabin. A teenager whispered, That was powerful, as her phone captured every syllable. The captain stepped forward again, but his composure was gone. Escort him off now, he barked, but no one moved. The security officer at the front of the plane hesitated, glancing between Marcus and the wall of raised phones. His hand hovered near his radio, but he did not act. The risk of making the wrong move was suddenly greater than the risk of doing nothing. Mia took another step into the aisle, her voice louder than before. Captain, this is not a disruption caused by him. This is a disruption caused by you. He is calm. He is seated. He has shown proof. You are escalating this because you refuse to accept him. The cabin murmured in agreement, voices rising in a chorus of defiance. The passengers were no longer silent observers. They had become a jury, and their verdict was clear. Marcus lifted his head, his eyes calm but sharp. You can continue to humiliate me if you wish, but understand this. You are not deciding whether I fly tonight. You are deciding whether you have a career tomorrow. The words landed heavy, undeniable, and for the first time the crew's authority looked fragile, almost shattered. The stage they thought they controlled was no longer theirs. It belonged to him. And everyone in that cabin knew it. The lead attendant's face hardened, her eyes flashing with a desperation that came from knowing control was slipping away. She grabbed Marcus's torn boarding pass from the tray table and tossed it to the floor like trash. "This is worthless. You are not a first-class passenger. You are a liar trying to steal what is not yours." Her voice rose high enough to echo through the entire cabin. Gasps rippled across the rows. A mother with her young daughter clutched the child's hand and shook her head. "This is beyond wrong," she whispered, her phone still filming. A man 2 seats away muttered, "That is not just procedure, that is an attack." Richard Bennett leaned back in seat 2 amperes with a smirk. "See? They know what they are doing. We belong here. He does not." His words carried arrogance, but the smugness in his eyes flickered with doubt. Laura Bennett shifted uncomfortably beside him, her champagne glass trembling in her hand. The younger attendant pressed forward, his voice sharp. "Sir, if you do not stand right now, we will physically remove you." He reached for Marcus's arm, but before his fingers could make contact, Marcus spoke. His voice was calm, but the weight behind it was unshakable. "Touch me, and you will lose more than your job." The threat was not shouted. It was delivered with such certainty that the attendant froze in place, his hand hovering in the air like a child caught reaching for fire. The silence that followed was broken only by the click of camera phones capturing the moment. The captain, red-faced and trembling with authority he no longer fully held, turned toward the security officer waiting near the cockpit door. "Remove him now. Drag him out if you have to." The officer stepped forward slowly, but the aisle was no longer clear. 3 passengers stood from their seats, forming an unspoken barrier. One was the man in the gray business jacket. Another was a woman in her 50s with silver hair, and the third was Mia, the trainee. Their bodies created a wall of quiet defiance. Mia's voice shook but carried. "You will not touch him. His seat is valid. Your scanner proved it. We all saw it." The silver-haired woman added firmly, "If you try to drag him out, you will be dragging us too." Phones lifted higher. The glow of red record lights now scattered across the cabin like stars. The truth was no longer a secret hidden between Marcus and the crew. It was public, undeniable, immortalized in dozens of recordings that would outlast this flight. Marcus leaned back in his seat, his calm presence cutting deeper than any argument. "You called me a fraud in a seat I paid for. You tore my boarding pass. You gave my place to someone else. And you did it because of how I look. Every second you continue this, you dig your own grave." The cabin fell into silence again, but it was not the silence of control. It was the silence of a storm about to break, a storm that would not fall on Marcus, but on the crew who had chosen arrogance over truth. The captain's face flushed crimson as he barked toward the galley. "Security, get in here now!" His voice was sharp, clipped, a final attempt to reassert dominance over a situation that was already spiraling beyond his grasp. The cabin doors at the front opened, and the airline's ground security officer stepped in, his dark navy uniform crisp, his badge gleaming under the cabin lights. He scanned the scene quickly, Marcus seated calmly, passengers standing protectively in the aisle, and crew members trembling in their own fury. The lead attendant pointed furiously at Marcus. "That man is a fraud. He is refusing lawful orders. Escort him off immediately." The officer hesitated. His training told him to act, but his instincts warned him of something far heavier. Phones were everywhere, filming from every angle. Whispers filled the air, and he could feel the current of doubt moving through the passengers. He took a step forward, then stopped when Marcus finally moved. Marcus reached slowly for his phone resting on the armrest. His hand was steady, deliberate, commanding. He tapped one number and raised it to his ear. The cabin fell into silence again, every passenger straining to hear the quiet words that followed. "Rachel," Marcus said, his tone calm, almost casual. "Activate protocol. Notify the board immediately. Horizon Airlines is about to have a situation." A voice came through the speaker, crisp and professional. "Understood, sir. I am logging the incident in real time. Corporate compliance is being alerted now." The officer froze mid-step, the words hanging in the air like thunder before lightning. The passengers exchanged stunned looks. A woman whispered, "He has an assistant. Did you hear that?" Another passenger muttered, "This is bigger than it looks." The captain tried to mask his panic with bluster. That phone call does not change anything. This is my aircraft, and I am in command. His voice wavered, betraying the fear beneath his authority. Marcus lowered the phone, his gaze fixed on the captain. His words were calm, deliberate, every syllable heavy with purpose. Command does not mean tyranny. Command means responsibility. And right now, every second of your decisions is being documented by both witnesses and corporate. Gasps broke across the cabin. A teenager muttered, "He sounds like he actually owns something here." The mother beside him nodded. "He is not bluffing. Look at the way he speaks. That is power." The security officer stepped back slightly, uncertainty flashing in his eyes. He had seen unruly passengers before, but never someone who carried himself like Marcus did, calm, composed, utterly in control despite the chaos around him. Rachel's voice came through the phone again, clear and unshaken. "Sir, the board members are aware. They are requesting your confirmation to escalate." Marcus nodded once, his eyes still locked on the captain. "Proceed," he said simply. The officer stopped moving. The passengers leaned forward, and in that instant, the balance of power shifted completely. The crew, once so sure of their authority, were no longer the ones holding the future of this flight. Marcus Carter was, and no one could look away. The cabin was still when Marcus lowered his phone, but the silence was no longer in the crew's favor. Every passenger leaned forward, phones raised, hearts pounding, waiting for what would come next. The captain stood rigid, jaw clenched, but his hands betrayed him, trembling slightly at his sides. The lead attendant swallowed hard, realizing the tide had turned, but she forced her voice louder. "Do not be fooled. He is a scammer trying to intimidate us with a phone call." Marcus turned his head slowly, his calm gaze sweeping the rows. His voice, when it came, carried weight like stone dropping into water. "My name is Marcus Carter. I am not just a passenger. I am one of the principal shareholders of Horizon Airlines. 25% of this company belongs to me." Gasps erupted across the cabin. Phones shot higher, capturing every word, every flicker of panic across the crew's faces. A man in row 3 nearly dropped his phone, his whisper barely audible. "He owns part of the airline." A teenager in row 5 shouted, "I knew it. Look at the way he sat there. I knew it." The Bennetts froze in seat 2 amperes. Richard's smugness drained away, leaving his face pale. Laura covered her mouth with one hand, her eyes wide. The champagne flute on her tray table trembled until it tipped, spilling golden liquid across the armrest. She did not even notice. The captain's mouth opened, but no words came out. His voice, once sharp with authority, failed him completely. The younger attendant stumbled backward, his hand dropping from the armrest where he had tried to assert dominance minutes earlier. His smirk was gone, replaced by the dawning horror of what he had done. Mia stepped closer, her voice strong now, every trace of fear gone. "I told you, his ticket was valid. He belongs here." She turned to Marcus, nodding with quiet respect. "And now everyone knows exactly who you are." Passengers erupted in murmurs, some clapping softly, others shaking their heads in disbelief. A woman with silver hair in row 4 leaned toward her phone and said clearly, "You are watching the crew humiliate a black man who owns this airline. This is history, and I am recording it." Marcus's voice cut through the chaos, calm but edged with finality. "You called me a fraud in a cabin I helped build. You tore my boarding pass for a seat that exists because of my investment. You tried to erase me in front of witnesses. That mistake will not disappear. It will define you." "That." The captain finally found his voice, but it was brittle, cracking under pressure. You cannot expect us to have known that." Marcus did not flinch. "You did not need to know who I was. All you needed to do was respect the truth in front of you. You failed." The passengers applauded, some standing, their voices rising in agreement. The cameras captured every second, every crack in the crew's authority, every ounce of dignity that Marcus had reclaimed simply by being who he was. The revelation had shattered the facade. The crew was no longer in control. Marcus Carter was. And the world, watching through 100 recording phones, would not forget it. The cabin felt like it had shifted on its axis. Where moments ago the crew had stood tall with authority, now they looked small, cornered, exposed under the weight of truth. The passengers no longer whispered. They spoke openly, voices carrying like a rising tide. Unbelievable. They humiliated their own owner. This is going viral. The lead attendant's face drained of color. She stumbled back toward the galley, gripping the counter as if it could steady her collapsing certainty. Her lips parted, but no words came. The younger attendant avoided Marcus's eyes completely, his chest heaving as though every breath carried the weight of regret. The captain stared ahead, pale, his authority dissolved into silence. Mia stepped forward into the aisle, no longer the timid trainee. Her voice was clear, sharp with conviction. You all saw it. You all heard it. He belongs here. They lied. They profiled. And they tried to erase him. She turned her phone outward so the camera captured both Marcus and the trembling crew. But now the truth is documented. Passengers clapped, not out of politeness, but with real energy, a surge of approval. A man in a gray jacket raised his voice. I am sending this live. The world will see how Horizon Airlines treats its own owner. A chorus of agreement followed. Richard Bennett shifted uncomfortably in Marcus's seat, the bravado gone from his face. He stood awkwardly, tugging at his jacket, muttering, We did not know. His wife Laura rose beside him, shame coloring her features. This seat is yours, sir. It always was. She stepped aside, her voice trembling. We should not have sat here. The eyes of the passengers bore into the crew, into the couple, into the very foundation of the injustice they had all just witnessed. The flight attendants, who had once strutted with authority, now looked like children caught in a lie too large to escape. Marcus stood slowly, every motion controlled, deliberate, filled with gravity. He did not need to shout. His very presence commanded the room. You called me a fraud in my own cabin, he said, his voice low but clear enough for every ear. You tried to erase me in front of the very people who keep this airline alive. Tonight, you revealed more about yourselves than you ever intended, and you will answer for it. The silence that followed was deafening. The captain's lips trembled. The lead attendant clutched the galley counter tighter, her knuckles white. The younger attendant lowered his gaze to the carpet, unable to face Marcus or the sea of witnesses. The passengers, on the other hand, were electric. Phones recorded from every angle, claps turned into cheers. Someone shouted, "This is justice." Another voice rang out, "Respect is not optional." The balance of the cabin was complete. The crew who had tried to strip Marcus of dignity now stood stripped themselves bare, powerless, crushed under the weight of their own arrogance. And Marcus Carter, calm and steady, had never needed to raise his voice to take back what was his. Marcus lifted his phone again, his tone steady, commanding but never raised. Rachel, log the termination. Effective immediately, the captain, lead attendant, and junior attendant are suspended from all Horizon operations. Freeze their credentials and begin the audit. A crisp voice answered. Confirmed. Their access is revoked. At that very moment, the captain's badge vibrated red. The lead attendant's device buzzed, locking her out of the crew system. The younger attendant stared at his tablet in shock as the screen went dark. Their authority collapsed in an instant, stripped away in front of every witness. Gasps and cheers rippled through the cabin. Phones shook with excitement as passengers captured the live unraveling of power. The couple in seat 2 Amperes stepped back quickly, eyes wide, as if the ground beneath them had disappeared. Marcus returned to his seat, calm as ever. You tried to take away more than a chair. You tried to take away dignity. Tonight, you lost your careers instead. The crew stood frozen, powerless, their downfall sealed by their own arrogance. The cabin roared with applause, not because Marcus demanded it, but because the passengers had witnessed justice unfold before their very eyes. Phones remained high, capturing the moment that would soon sweep across every corner of the internet. The hum of engines was steady, but inside the cabin, the air felt electric, charged with a truth too strong to ignore. Marcus leaned back into seat 2 Amperes, reclaiming what was his without lifting a finger. His presence was calm, immovable, the very picture of quiet power. He looked toward the passengers, toward the cameras, and then directly at the trembling crew. His voice was low, but it carried to the farthest row. Respect is not a courtesy. Respect is the foundation. When you tear it away, you tear away your own future. Mia stood nearby, her chin lifted, pride shining in her eyes. The passengers looked at her as much as they looked at Marcus, recognizing that courage had not only come from power, but from conscience. She had spoken when others stayed silent, and now her name would be remembered too. The Bennetts, still pale with shame, sat quietly in the aisle, unable to meet anyone's gaze. Their entitlement had been stripped bare under the weight of one man's patience. Marcus rested his hands on the armrest and delivered the words that would echo far beyond this flight. I do not need to record this moment. I am the result of it. And no policy, no uniform, no arrogance can erase that truth. The passengers erupted again, the sound rising like thunder in the confined cabin. What began as humiliation had ended in revelation. Marcus Carter had not only reclaimed his seat, he had defined the true cost of prejudice. And for Horizon Airlines, that cost would be $900 million and a lesson they would never forget.